Okay. All right, live week 3, chapter 3 of the My First Bitcoin Diploma in English. And these guys are taking this international. There are now chapters popping up all around the world, which is very exciting. Being able to do it in English or Spanish around the world means that about 2/3 of the world's population can do this now, which is really super awesome. Remember, this is about learning about how money works and also about how Bitcoin works. If you have questions about making sure that you keep your Bitcoin safe and secure, we're going to get into that in the later weeks, but it's great to understand why you're doing it, and that's why we're here.
No doubt about that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over a few housekeeping matters just before we get started, and I'm going to switch. Whoop, don't want that one. Okay, there's my newsletter that I was busy writing. Let me just refresh this. I have restarted my entire PC in the hope that we wouldn't have that issue, but we're having that issue. Okay, so let's get into this.
Do you want to?
I certainly do. We're going to start there.
All right. Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
So our website, if you want to, please come here and sign up in the form on the right-hand side. The reason that you want to do that is so you can be in the draw to win one of the hardware devices. We purchased a seed signer, and I have one here which I could show you, but it's in the other room. You can win a seed signer or a crypto tag plate or a Shift Crypto Bitbox. So sign up there and you have the opportunity. Also, you will see that we're also advertising each week, and there's a link to the next video that's coming and a playlist for all the past videos. Also got our brand, the partner brands here. So Seed Signer, Crypto Tag, and Shift Crypto. If you want to go and check out their website and check out their devices. So Seed Signer, this is FOSS, which is free open source hardware. This is great for creating your Bitcoin wallet completely off the internet, which is one of the most secure ways to do it. And being able to use open source hardware and software that you can buy off the shelf is a great way to do that. Then we have the crypto tag here, which is a seed saver device. So what you do is when you generate your seed phrase, you want to keep it in a really secure place. And these guys help you back it up onto a material that won't melt or burn or accidentally sort of get thrown out because it looks like paper. And it's a really handy tool to add to your toolkit. And then we also have Shift Crypto with the Bitbox 2. This is a Bitcoin specific little USB device which you plug in. And again, it's a hardware wallet, and it will allow you to create a seed phrase completely offline, which means it never touches the internet, which makes it incredibly secure. So thank you to these three guys who are helping us out with this. They're offering a device to several people. Make sure you're on our email list, and you might be a lucky person to get one and practice backing up your seed keys and phrases when we get into that later on.
Absolutely. It's exciting.
It's very exciting. It's pretty cool. I'm very excited to play with our new one. Okay, so that's the website. Also on our website, remember, we have other information. So we've got an ebook, which is all about us coming to El Salvador. We have some recommended reading, and there's a number of books there which we recommend to help your Bitcoin knowledge and the sovereign lifestyle. Also, we have more links to the My First Bitcoin in the description of this video. There is also a link to the English and Spanish diploma. And then we just talk about our mailing list, and down the bottom, we've also got property and mortgages if you're interested in learning about property here in El Salvador.
Yeah.
And I might just mention Mash real quick. We've actually got this awesome tipping thing on our website. So if you want to send us a tip on the website, you can do that. It's a wallet which you can easily sign up to and get started straight away. Cool. Let's do the diploma, because that's what we're here for.
Get started.
All right.
Chapter 3.
Uncovering the dark side of fiat. All right. So we're going to cover a few things tonight. We have a class exercise which we're going to kick off with, and we've got some bits and pieces we'll do to make that as easy as possible. There is one video tonight. It's only a short one, but it's super useful. They do a really good job of actually explaining a lot of the aspects we're going to cover. And so the biggest threats to your money: inflation, debasement, purchasing power loss, debt, the fine line between help and harm, the Fed and its partners, how the government and banks control money supply. And 3.4, the magic of money creation. The time value of money and its role in economic growth, saving money in a hard time, fractional reserve banking, and another class exercise. I heard a really funny thing this week, which was fictional reserve banking, because basically there is no money in the banks anymore. All right, that was a spoiler.
I was going to say.
And my PDF isn't scrolling either.
Oh.
So let's just quickly update that. Nicki can start, reading it.
All right. So first part of this, the class exercise, the effects of inflation and auction activity. So the objective of this is to understand the concept of money supply and how it affects the prices of goods and services in an economy. So just some definitions for you. So money supply, it's the total amount of money in circulation, right? Total amount of money in circulation within an economy at a specific time. This includes physical currency, such as coins and bills, electronic money held in bank accounts. The money supply is an important concept in economics as it can affect the overall health of the economy. And then the other definition is an auction. So auction is a public sale in which goods or property are sold to the highest bidder. Now, this class exercise, of course, we're not in a classroom situation, so we're not really going to physically be able to do it. We have, but I'm going to read through this and then we will go through a whiteboard that we've put up. So the exercise goes like this. So you will receive a random amount of monopoly money from the teacher. This represents the money supply in the society. Then, so the amount of money that we've got.
So would you like me to switch to the other one?
Yes, I think we do.
We're going to switch to the other one, and that will help us see what's going on. So let's turn on our whiteboard, which we prepared earlier. All right, let's do this.
Okay, so the money that we've put into the society is the first one, which is going to be
$100.
$10.
Oh, sorry, $10.
$10. Yep. Okay, so we've got $10 going into society. The teacher will auction a candy bar to the students. To win the candy bar, you will need to make the highest bid using your monopoly money. Record the winning bid next to the money supply. Okay, so we've got Alice with $6, Blake with $3, and Charlie with $1. Realistically.
So if you're in the classroom, you would say $1, $1, $1 for your candy bar.
Yeah.
And Charlie would definitely put his hand up because that's all he's got.
Yeah.
Blake would probably compete knowing he's got a bit more leeway.
And Blake might go,
$2.
$2. I know I can do $2.
Yeah.
And Alice might just sit and hold because she knows she's got a little bit more.
And Charlie would be out. So which means that Alice basically would have to come in and she's like, you know what, $3. And Blake's like, oh, that's the max I've got. So that candy could go anywhere from $3 to $6, depending on whether Alice thinks she can just get the other guys out of the game.
Yeah.
So what are we going to put in there? $4?
$4,
Let's put $4 in there.
Yeah. Okay, right. So then what happens is the teacher's now going to increase the monopoly money, and she's going to add a significant amount more money to increase the total money supply.
So she's just randomly handing it out.
Yes. So she has now increased the money to $100. So it's gone from $10 in the classroom to $100. So she now bids the second candy bar. Of course, they've got a lot more money now. Alice has already won the candy bar. She may be going, the starting bids might start at $10. Of course, remember, the people here bidding don't actually know what the other people have got either. So just to be aware.
We've deliberately sort of evened it out a little bit here to prove a point, but the point will work out. So basically, these guys are going to eventually get to $30. And then after $30, you will see that we'll then bid above that. So where are we going to go?
Okay, so, why not go $35?
$35.
Yeah,
okay.
$35.
We'll say Candy 2 was sold for $35.
Yep. And then Candy 3, we have got the teacher now is going to do another huge amount of increase the supply of monopoly money into the classroom. So she's actually now increased the monopoly amount, or the supply, should I say, of to up to $1,000. So we've gone from 10, 100 to 1,000. She split them up, not evenly. It's been a random amount. Bidding starts. It might start at $50. Alice is out. She just can't even bid for it.
Alice,
she's gone.
Yeah, I mean, if she puts down $40, then Charlie's like, I can easily clean that up.
Yeah.
And you'd easily get up to the $240 mark. But you can quickly see what's happening here. Like the price of the candy is getting pretty high pretty quickly. And
you've got to also remember that once one person stops bidding, then of course the next person's bid, they only have to go actually one bar above, and they've got it really anyway. Yeah. So I mean, the next chocolate bar could actually go for $241.
Yeah, and normally you might do this with 10 people in a class and bigger amounts of money, and there'll be more sort of auction bidding, which would be a lot more fun. So anyway, let's just say it goes for what, $300.
Yeah.
Okay. And cool.
Okay, so. Now, there is a light bulb moment. Maybe I'll come back to that.
So I'll just cover what's happened here. Basically, what we can see is that the money supply has 10x'd each time, and it's the same candy every time. But what's happened is because of the increase in the money supply, the candy has 10x'd in basically the value that it's been sold for each time, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same candy, though.
Yeah. Okay. I will do that light bulb moment now. Okay, so societies can often be unpredictable and unjust. Exemplify by the simulation of a teacher randomly giving a significant amount of money to only a select few students. This mimics a real-life situations where unequal distribution of resources and opportunities can occur, highlighting the inherent randomness and unfairness in many situations.
Excellent.
Okay.
So you'll see here, we've got a nice summary of what we ended up doing. So candy 1, we ended up selling for $4, and candy 2, we ended up selling for $35, and candy 3 is $300.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So they've got a couple of questions here they want answered. So how did the increase in money supply affect the winning bids for the candy bars?
Well, the more money that was available, the higher the winning bid was, even though it was for the same piece of candy each time and the same quantity of candy each time. And this could be a really good example. We've definitely seen it in the New Zealand economy over the last, how many years? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Oh.
But the housing market is quite a good example. The supply does change in the housing market, but we're taking a very simple example to prove a point versus a more complex example, which does have nuance, but similar principles apply.
Absolutely. And of course, if you've got other suggestions, do put them in the questions as well.
Our answers are not the final answers. We don't have final answers. Like, they're not in the back of the book. That's actually a recommendation we're going to make to these guys, that they put recommended answers in the back of the book, because sometimes we are actually questioning the language. So,
but these are ones that we've come up with anyway. Yep. So, okay. So what is the relationship between the money supply and inflation?
All right. If the money supply increases, there is a higher chance people will spend and or pay more for an item, which will increase the prices. That's basically what we saw, where if people have more money to spend, more disposable income, they are happy to pay more for that item. And that is just the human nature.
Yeah.
I really want to eat. And if it's a treat, I will even pay more than normal to get it.
Yeah. And I was going to say also, what's the relationship with money supply? No, it's not. It was something. There was another thing that's going to come up. Okay. All right. Now, and how is the money supply relevant in the real world?
All right. So the more money that is available in the economy, the more chance people will spend it on daily living and variable spending, possibly increasing prices on many goods and services.
So when we say variable spend here, just so you've got an idea of what we're talking about the non-fixed spend that you have, or the non-fixed costs. So, your fixed costs, so your rent, normally your power, your phone bills. The variable spender, you're eating out, the restaurants, clothes you buy, the types of foods you're eating, the boats you're buying, the cars you're buying. So that's your variable, the holidays you're making. So that's your variable spend.
Non-essential items.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah. And then can you think of other factors that can affect the prices of goods and services?
All right. So supply and demand, and the video is actually going to cover this point as well. So for example, food. If there is a bad production season, then the supply can go down, and that would actually force the price to go up because there's less availability and people will pay more. If there is a good production year, then the supply can go up and the price was most likely to go down. And you may see that in seasonal fruits, where if they've got too much fruit because it's the peak of the season, you might be able to pick up bananas or watermelons or pineapples super cheap. But if you try and get them during the winter, they might be super expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Cool.
So hopefully that makes sense.
All right. You can go for this one.
All right.
I'll do these.
Okay. The biggest threats to your money: inflation, debasement, and the loss of purchasing power. The current global economic climate is challenging, which can make it difficult to save. One factor contributing to this is inflation, a phenomenon that occurs when the value of money decreases over time. This means that even if you save more dollars now, it may not have the same purchasing power in the future, meaning that more money will actually buy you fewer things. Recognizing economic conditions and their impact on your personal finances will help you make informed decisions about saving and spending. Let us begin with a realistic scenario to explain each term. So we're going to go and I'll read that out. Jamie is a college student who lives in a small apartment. He works part-time at a coffee shop to pay for his living expenses and tuition. As soon as he began living independently, Jamie became a pro at managing his own ledger. Not the hardware device, but a record of his spending. At the beginning of the year, he budgeted $10,000 for his living expenses, including rent, food, and other necessities.
So this graph here, you'll see the shopping carts. Now that's going to be relevant to some discussion that we're having on the next page, just so we don't need to, we'll come back to that. But before we carry on, just purchasing power is the amount of goods or services that can be bought with a given amount of money. And inflation is an increase in the general level of prices of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. When the general price level rises, each unit of currency buys fewer goods and services. Consequently, inflation reflects a reduction in the purchasing power of money, a loss of real value in the medium of exchange and the unit of account within an economy. And just a point there, I don't know if you ever remember, you used to get the chocolate bars and they'd be $1. And so you'd still go, and then you'd go and buy, a chocolate bar. It was still $1, but it was half the size, or it was skinnier, or it was flatter.
It would get smaller.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you might buy a 200-gram chocolate bar for $1. Then it would be 180 grams.
Yeah.
And it's called shrinkflation, where your devices start shrinking in the process. Your food starts shrinking, but the price stays the same. And this is a technique to hide inflation. Yeah.
And then if you want to know what a ledger is a detailed record of all your monetary transactions, whether it's money you're earning or spending. A ledger helps you keep track of it all.
Okay. So these were his transactions for January. This ledger shows that Jamie's starting balance on his checking account on January 1st was $1,600, out of which he spent $800 to pay for rent. He then spent a debit, spending is a debit, of $100 on groceries and received $500, a credit, in pay from his part-time job, bringing his balance back up to $1,200. He then spent, or a debit, money on gas and textbooks, bringing his balance down to $650 at the end of the month. So you can see all of his transactions, and on the right-hand side, it's a running total of how much money he's got based on incoming and outgoing. 12 months later, while having lunch with his grandfather, Jamie notices that his budget is not stretching as far as it used to. He realizes that the prices of the goods and services he needs have increased significantly over the past year, and he wondered why. When he saw this image, he could not believe his eyes. And I think we're referencing the image above, which is the shopping carts. When he bought it up with his grandfather, he was told, "In 1956, I was just a young man starting out in the world. I remember that I used to earn $100 a month as a factory worker. It may not seem like much by today's standards, but it was a decent wage at the time. In fact, I was able to save up enough money to buy a small house in the suburbs." As we can see, the cost of each item in the basket, which is the shopping carts above, has increased, leading to an overall decreasing in his purchasing power. Thankfully, Jamie has mastered the use of a ledger, for it clearly showed him how his annual purchasing power has decreased. So we'll go back up and take a look just to reiterate what's happening here. So each of these dollar bills is $100. So $100 in 1956 bought you a full shopping cart. $100 in 2020 buys you half a shopping cart. And they're predicting that in the future, $100 will be lucky to buy you 2 or 3 items. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to $100 at the supermarket not going as far as it used to 10 years ago.
Completely.
All right. And the hamburger is an interesting inflation device. We'll just cover it now while it's here. But basically what's happening is how inflation changed the price of a hamburger, year over year change, and in the price of selected ingredients of a hamburger. And so these are real price increases from April 21 to 22. The bread roll went up by 10%. The lettuce went up 12.7%. The tomato only 0.4%.
Must have been in season.
Yeah. Bacon, 17.7%, ground beef, 14.8%, and the condiments went up 9.2%. So this is based on retail prices from urban consumers. So you can see how all of these items end up increasing the price of the burger overall when he goes to the restaurant from one year to the next. And on average, you're looking at a minimum of a 10% increase there on the price of the burger. So Jamie, continuing his conversation with his grandfather, what? That's crazy. I can't even imagine what my rent would have cost back then. Grandfather, well, let me see. If we take inflation into account, $1 would have bought me about 10 bags of pretzels back then. Jamie, wow, that's really interesting, Grandpa. But how much would that be worth today? Grandfather, oh, things were much cheaper. A loaf of bread would only cost a few cents, and you could buy a gallon of gasoline for just a quarter. It is unbelievable how much the cost of living has gone up. Hope you guys are enjoying my voices. So this chart here is quite interesting, and basically what it's showing is so this big green section is actually showing how the purchasing power of the US dollar has changed from the years 1910 down to 2020 today. And basically we've got some examples of events that have changed certain things. So the purchasing power of the US dollar has fallen sharply over the last century due to rising inflation and money supply. So the last 100 years. At the start here, we have the Federal Reserve Act creates a central bank with the ability to manage the country's monetary supply. And that happened around 1913. And that was where the money supply was still on a gold standard and we're doing all sorts of things. Then the stock market crashed, and the lead up to the Great Depression, where the US President Roosevelt criminalizes the possession of gold. So it was interesting that the gold-backed dollar was doing quite well, like it was recovering quite well. But it was 1971 where they removed it. So the Bretton Woods Agreement establishes the gold standard and the US dollar as the world's currency reserve. And of course, being the world currency reserve comes with all sorts of responsibilities and management. You're going to get gamification, and a lot of people were probably gaming the system. And then we can see, due to the gamification of the system, the gold standard is abandoned and the currencies are no longer linked to gold. And that was in 1971, but it didn't seem to help. It's just made things worse. So quantitative easing, QE1, begins in response to the financial crisis here in 2008 financial crisis. And the US money supply grew by 3.8 trillion in 2020, equal to 20% of all dollars ever created. So we're starting to get exponential numbers down here, and the purchasing power is basically shot at this point. And then down along the bottom here, we've got a interesting comparison, which is actually, we find it quite tricky to get our head around it, especially without clear explanation of what's happening. But so the purchasing power of $1 from 2020 was the equivalent of $26 of purchasing power back in 1910. And so you go along and it shows you how that $1 is losing its equivalent purchasing power of today through to the point where we get back to $1, which is the value in 2020. So $1 was able to buy $15 worth of goods back in 1930 in today's standard. So whatever you can buy for $15 today is what $1 of value today could have bought back then, if that makes sense. It's a bit tricky. The math's a bit funny. All right. Jamie needs to budget an additional $1,000 for the same basket of goods and services that he purchased for the previous year. This means that his purchasing power has decreased by $1,000 and he now has to spend more money to buy the same goods and services. The basket of goods and services includes rent for his apartment, groceries, and other necessities. The following table shows the cost of each item in the basket in the first year and the second year, as well as the percentage increase in price. And what I found really interesting about this table, so rent, $4,000, $4,500, 12.5%. Groceries, $2,000. It's actually a bit of a typo there. It's gone from $2,000 to $4,300, 15%. So that jump's obviously not correct. We'll make sure that these guys know about it. But it's the idea was to show a 15% increase. Necessities, $4,000 to $4,200, and we've got a 5% increase. In total, his overall expenses have gone up 10%. What I find really interesting about this is that he basically needs to buy accommodation and groceries. He's got no choice. Like, you need to eat and sleep somewhere safe. And they are the things that went up the most. He had no choice but to buy these, and they went up the most. Necessities, I mean, it's a lot of necessities. But the price increase only went up 5%. So just remember, your variable spend is often something that's easy to hide or adjust, but rent and groceries you can't, and it's just
your necessities also could be your power, your phone, your petrol.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it was just really interesting to notice that these two were the biggest increases out of all of them. Jamie earns more in a year than his grandfather ever did, but this also disincentivizes saving. It's more advantageous to spend money now since its value decreases. This hinders the ability to plan for the future. As shown in a previous graph in section 2.3, so this was last week, salary growth year over year in the United States has remained stagnant for the average citizen, meaning most people aren't receiving raises at the same rate as the decreasing value of their money despite working harder. So the graph that they're actually referring to, I believe, is from when the gold standard separated from 1971.
Yeah.
And you can actually see a divergence in the output and production compared to what people are actually earning. It could have been worse for Jamie. Should we show that to the camera? Is that what we're going to do there?
Okay.
That way. Okay, so the little graph that we're talking about from last week is that one there, and you can see how the wages, they go flat, they're the darker line, and you can see the one escaping, which is output, or the production of the people. So the people are more productive, but they're getting paid the same or
Yeah.
technically less because their dollar's buying less. It could have been a lot worse for Jamie. For example, Zimbabwe experienced hyperinflation in the late 2000s when the country's economy was hit by a combination of political instability, economic mismanagement, and external factors such as drought and sanctions. As a result, the value of the Zimbabwean dollar plummeted and the government was forced to print more money. The 100,000 Zimbabwean bill was introduced in Zimbabwe in 2008. Because of hyperinflation, it was worth only a few US dollars at the time. Despite its high face value, the 100,000 Zimbabwean dollar bill was not enough to buy basic necessities like food or fuel, and people had to carry large bundles of cash to make everyday purchases. And I really want to highlight that it's not the first time that this has happened in recent history. There's other countries that have had similar situations where literally wheelbarrows of cash to buy a loaf of bread. After considering the significant price increases since the mid-50s in the US and the example of hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, it becomes clear that the impact of inflation on an individual's purchasing power can vary greatly depending on their location and the time period in which they lived. Inflation tends to affect those who live in poor nations much more than it does those living in rich countries. This highlights the fact that it is often pure luck where and when an individual is born, and that the circumstances of an individual's birth can have a significant impact on their quality of life and economic opportunities. So our handy friend here, Satoshi on the right, he's suggesting we go and watch a video. And so this is a 5-minute video, and we're going to check and see if, oh, look, it's working. This is awesome. Okay, so hopefully the sound comes through. We've had one issue before. If it doesn't, please let us know. Otherwise, let's do it. Oh, hello.
Oh, no sound.
Okay. All right, so we were just told there's no sound. So we're going to go back and we're going to do this again. I got another plan, so let's do it.
Inflation isn't
Alrighty. So hopefully that helped answer a whole heap of bits and pieces. I felt like it was quite a good video, actually. I really enjoyed that one.
Okay.
All right, let's get back to...
Right. 3.2, debt, the fine line between help and harm. Debt is a double-edged sword. It is true that borrowing money can provide a much-needed financial boost, whether it's for individuals making a big purchase, businesses investing in their growth, or governments funding important services. But borrowing too much can lead to financial ruin. When you can't pay the interest of your debts, it becomes harder to pay your bills and stay afloat. This is especially true when an entity takes on more debt to pay off existing debt and gets caught in the vicious cycle known as a debt spiral.
So we've got a little light bulb here. Debt is money that is owed by one person or organization to another. When you have debt, you are required to pay back the money you owe, usually with interest and by a certain date.
So the debt crisis is a worldwide problem, including in the United States. Currently, the government is spending more money than it is earning. To pay its bills, it has been borrowing more and more money. However, this cycle of debt and higher borrowing costs can soon harm the government's credit rating. If the debt becomes too much, the government may have financial difficulties and potentially go bankrupt, just as many other countries have in the past. So the graph that they've got here is, going from 2,000 or more GDP ratio, or 100, right down to less than 10%, which is the dark green, and there's very few dark greens down in this, country, the world. So it's quite interesting checking out all the different countries and their debt GDP ratio to GDP.
I'm just noticing a few people in the chat are saying that there was no sound for the video even after we tried to rejig it. The link is down in the description. Really sorry that that didn't come through. It is coming through on Rumble. I don't know why YouTube has a problem. All right, let's take a look.
Okay, so debt taken on by the government can have long-term effects on future generations. Printing more money to fund expenses can result in currency devaluation and a possible collapse of the monetary system. But how can we measure the risk of a country taking on too much debt? One way is through the debt to GDP ratio, which shows the amount of a country's total debt as a percentage of its GDP. The debt to GDP ratio is a way to see if the country can pay its debts. If the ratio is high, the country may have trouble paying its debts in future. If the ratio is low, the country may be able to pay its debts easily and be in good financial shape. It's important to remember that the debt to GDP ratio is only one part of understanding a country's money situation.
So we've got another light bulb. Gross domestic product, or GDP. It is a measure of the total value of goods and services produced within a country over a specific period of time, typically a year. It is often used as a measure of the size and health of an economy. All right. The Fed and its partners, how the government and banks control the money supply. Have you ever stopped to consider where the trillions of dollars in stimulus funds that were distributed during the pandemic came from? And who gets to decide how much is given to and whom? The allocation of these funds has the power to greatly impact society and the economy, yet it often goes largely unexamined. There are several tools that centralized governments can use to manage how much money supply there is at a specific moment in time. Central banks and governments can use monetary and fiscal policy tools to influence the money supply in the economy. We have two little light bulbs here.
Okay, so we've got the Central Bank of the United States is called the Federal Reserve, or you might have also heard the Fed. And then governments may borrow money to stimulate the economy, but this can lead to inflation if they have to print more money to pay back the loans. I'm
gonna point out some things here for people that aren't actually mentioned. So the central bank, I think they've actually referred to it earlier, but the Central Bank of the United States is called the Federal Reserve. It is not a government organization. It is not federal. It is a private organization. What I then find amusing is the next section, which talks about governments may borrow money. So, for example, the New Zealand government can borrow money from America or other countries and even private organizations. And it can also create its own money from a private organization, which is a central bank as well. So it's quite an interesting thing that governments today generally don't create money. It is actually outsourced to a private organization. So when they say governments may borrow money, pretty much governments only borrow money. And the reason the GDP is really important is that when these private organizations lend money to a government, they do it based on the GDP, which is what the people output. So what is backing the loan that the government has taken is literally the people and their output. They are the collateral if the country defaults on its loan. It's just an interesting thing to think about, because a lot of people think that they might not be responsible, but the people who loan the money, the private organizations, the bankers that loan the money, if the country defaults, they will honestly believe that they own the people in that country. And it's just something to think about if things get nasty. All right. Target rates, monetary policy, unemployment law. So these are things that the government would like to achieve along with the private banks that they work with. So unemployment below 6.5%, 2 to 3% annual increase in gross domestic product, and a core inflation rate between 2 to 2.5%. Or in other words, you make no money.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the...
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Glenn.
Oh, yes, thank you, Glenn. We appreciate that.
Okay. Expansionary fiscal policy versus the contradictionary fiscal policy. So aims to increase consumer spending and business investment to increase aggregated demand on economic growth. So you've got the increased government spending going up, and then the lower taxes going down. And then the contradiction versus the contradictionary fiscal policy, you've got aims to increase consumer spending and business investment to increase aggregate demand and economic growth. So you've got the increased taxes going up and the decreased government spending going down.
So just for people watching or listening, Glenn in the YouTube chat has tipped us $5. Thank you very much. And he's said, this is awesome. Hopefully to see you one day in El Salvador to deliver some feijoas.
Wow, I love feijoas. That must be the season.
Yeah, if you can get them on the plane and through the borders, mate, I'll be pretty impressed.
Yeah.
We'll treat you to some fruit on this side. Thank you. All right. So we've got a graph here, which is basically breaking down some of the things that the government uses to try and manage the economy. So just a tip as well. Glenn sent us a $5 tip on YouTube. If anybody does have Bitcoin Lightning, we do have Bitcoin Lightning addresses as well. And we get 100% of the Bitcoin Lightning, opposed to YouTube, which gives us 50%. Not complaining, but it's just an interesting thing. All right. Monetary policy. Description. Monetary policy involves adjusting interest rates to control the amount of money in circulation. For example, the Federal Reserve raising interest rates to slow down inflation or can lower them to stimulate employment. Fiscal policy. Fiscal policy involves using spending and tax policies to influence the economy. An example of this is the government increasing spending on infrastructure projects to stimulate economic growth. It can also decrease taxes so people will spend more. Exchange rate policy. I'll leave it there. The description, the use of a country's exchange rate, the value of its currency in relation to other currencies, to influence trade and the economy. For example, the Chinese government pegging the value of the yuan to the US dollar to stabilize its exchange rates. We're very aware of the New Zealand economy also fluctuating its exchange rate against a lot of nations to improve imports and exports of foreign goods. Supply shock, a sudden and unexpected event that disrupts the supply of goods and services, leading to changes in prices and the money supply. Example, a natural disaster that destroys a significant portion of a country's agricultural production, leading to food shortages and price increases. And that's what we talked about earlier. And it was actually also mentioned in the video as well, where he talks about a non-monetary inflation. If you guys could have heard it. Price controls. Government imposed limits on the prices of goods and services to manage inflation or stabilize prices. An example, the government setting a maximum price for gasoline to prevent price gouging during a crisis. For many people, we know how that also works when they try and fix prices.
Okay, so 3.4, the magic of money creation. The time value of money and its role in economic growth. Have you ever wondered why banks offer so many services to their customers? While it may seem like they are being generous, it's important to remember that banks are businesses and their primary goal is to make a profit. But how do they make a profit if they're giving away money in loans? In addition to earning interest on deposits, banks generate revenue in other ways, including charging interest on loans they give out, charging fees for services like ATM usage and account maintenance, earning money through investments like buying and selling securities or investing in real estate, keeping a percentage of loans in reserve and investing or lending out the rest, paying interest on deposits and charging fees on checking and savings accounts. Do that light bulb.
I will do the light bulb. By borrowing money at low interest rates and lending it out at higher rates, banks are able to turn a profit. They also generate income through fees and investment activities.
So if we look at the graph or the little money bags on the right-hand side, you've got the banks will borrow money from a depositor at an interest. So the banks are borrowing money. So someone's deposited money, they're going to use that money and give that person 5% interest. Okay, so the banks are then going to lend this money to some borrowers at a higher interest rate, so say 9%.
So, for example, a businessman may come in and say, I'd like to borrow money for my business, and they will loan it out at
a higher rate. Yep. And then so the banks pay interest from interest received by lending. Now, they've slightly done a mistake here. So they've got 9% minus 6% equals 4%, but it should be 9% minus 5% because they've actually paying 5% interest. And they keep the rest as profit. So they're actually keeping 4%. So what they're doing is someone's depositing money, they're using that person's money to lend it out at a high interest rate, which will mean that they're going to be making money from what they've lent out. So keep going. Okay. So, but why should this matter to you as an individual? Well, have you heard of the phrase, $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow? This concept is known as time value of money. And it's all about the idea that money is worth more in the present than in the future. This is because money can be invested to earn interest and because money can lose value over time due to inflation. So in other words, if you have money sitting in a savings account earning a low interest rate, it is not going to be worth as much in the future as it is today. On the other hand, if you invest your money in something that has the possibility of earning a higher return, you might come out ahead.
All right. To ensure that your money retains its value over time, the goal of investing is to earn a return that is higher than the rate of inflation. That's why your money will be worth more in the future than it is today. And it's actually a huge discussion at the moment in society where the cash rate in America got down to pretty much just above zero. And then the cost to borrow money is around 9%. So to earn money, there's no point in saving it. You need to go and find a riskier way to put it to work. And when you've got inflation that is apparently officially above 5% at the moment. A lot of people believe it's much higher than that, closer to 10% or more. You need to find an investment vehicle that will return more than that. I'm just going to plug this t-shirt. This is My First Bitcoin t-shirt, and you can buy them on their website. I think there's a link down in the description, and it does help support them. And just so you know, any profit that they make, it goes to training people in person to do the actual Bitcoin diploma. All right. 3.4.2, saving money in hard times. The current global economic situation, which was negatively affected by the pandemic, has brought about challenges such as high inflation and low interest rates on savings accounts. These conditions can make it tough to effectively save money. As inflation eats away at the value of currency over time, even if you save today, you may end up with less purchasing power in the future. But don't worry, there are still ways to save money and be financially secure. Here are just a few ideas to try. Make a budget. A budget is a plan for how you will use your money. It can help you see where you are spending too much money and where you can save. Set aside some money each month for saving and look for ways to cut back on your expenses. Start investing. Investing is a way to make your money grow over time. There are many types of investments to choose from, and you can find one that fits your budget and your level of risk. Get creative. There are many creative ways to save money. You can try cutting your own hair or bartering with others for goods and services. Be open to trying new things and looking for non-traditional solutions to your financial challenges.
Now, I want to just cut in here because there's also something I really like, and that is pay yourself first. If you pay yourself first, then you've already put aside some money, and you can then what money you've got to spend. So rather than actually doing a budget, you're actually going, if you paid yourself the first hour of every day that you work, and you pay yourself that hour, and then you've got the rest of the money that you can then, use for your expenditure. There's two books that really talk really well about this. One is The Richest Man in Babylon.
One of my favorites.
Yep. And the other one that I like, which is quite a different read, is The Latte Factor. And The Latte Factor is by David Batch, and The Richest Man of Babylon is by George Clason. But they're two really good books that you can read, and it's really well written.
Great, both great examples,
yeah.
Stories. They're told in a fable style. The Richest Man in Babylon, what he actually does is he suggests that you save 10% of everything you earn, and then he talks about putting it to work in smart ways. It's a really good book in terms of just basic money habits, and it works super well with a sound money like Bitcoin. And dollar cost averaging is one of the best ways to invest today over a long period of time. It's better than trying to become a full-time stock trader to try and protect your wealth.
Yeah.
All right.
Can carry on. Sorry.
Yep. Small interlude there. We'll put links to those in the content below. It is generally acceptable to take on debts as long as the money is used to generate income and increase purchasing power in the future. So for example, if you buy a car, it gets you to work so you can make money. This is because borrowing money can allow an individual or business to make investments that increase their productivity and efficiency, ultimately leading to greater profits and financial stability. For example, if a farmer takes out a loan to purchase new equipment that allows them to harvest their crops more quickly and efficiently, they may be able to generate more income and increase their purchasing power as a result. On the other hand, if the money is used to waste resources or make unproductive investments, it can lead to financial difficulties that wouldn't be a wise decision. By taking charge of your finances, which is what a good sovereign individual does, and being flexible, you will be better able to weather the storm of a tough economy and come out on top. And so, for example, that unproductive usage of money, a lot of young people can make a very easy mistake of taking out a student loan, going and spending it on parties, and then they're stuck with debt that wasn't well used. Now, we've got a graph on the side here. Unfortunately, the key is mismatched in terms of colors. So the 50% must have expenses is meant to be orange. So for example, your
Green.
housing, well, whichever way around you want to look at it.
Okay, yeah.
So your housing and transportation is 50% of your expenses. And so just to highlight this is called the 50-30-20 spending plan. And this is a budget technique, which, and there's plenty of budget techniques out there, but it's how you might break down the money that comes in. And
well, yeah, I don't know, because I mean, must have expenses. So college, savings, and travel.
So just
flexible expenses, I get that. That's right. And then your goals would be your house and transport, wouldn't they? Because they're your bigger things. Oh yeah, so it should be small. Yeah. Anyway.
And just so you know that this orange one actually takes up 50% of the box, which is what's going on. Okay. Sorry. There's a couple of we've made a list of small corrections for the My First Bitcoin team. And just so you know that it's a non-native English speaker who's actually put all this together. She's done a fantastic job, and we really appreciate the time and effort she's put in. And we're giving feedback on little things like this to help clean it up. If you find other things as well, do feel free to help out. It is open source, and that's what the community is all about.
Okay, fractional reserve banking 3.4.3. This is our last one. Okay, so far we've talked about how central banks like the Federal Reserve manage the money supply, how banks make money for themselves, and a few strategies on how to save money. But we haven't yet discussed how new money is actually created and introduced into society. It might seem like magic, but there is an interesting process behind it. Okay, so how does new money actually enter circulation and fuel economic growth? Unlike physical resources like food or water that can run out, money has no fixed limit. So how does it work? The government and the central bank and private banks all play a role in this process. Here is a simplified version of how the Federal Reserve, the Fed, can add 1 million into circulation.
Federal Reserve is not a government bank, just reiterating that. It's funny that they actually state the government, the central bank, and private banks, because the central bank is a private bank.
Okay, number one, the Fed determines that it wants to increase the money supply by $1 million. This decision is typically based on the Fed's monetary policy goals, such as boosting economic growth or stabilizing prices. 2, the Fed instructs a large commercial bank to create a $1 million deposit in its account at the Fed. This deposit is created out of thin air and is not backed by any physical assets. So remember, it's not backed by gold anymore.
It's backed by the GDP or the people in the nation.
When a commercial bank creates a deposit at the Fed, it is essentially borrowing money from the Fed. The Fed provides the bank with the funds for the deposit, and in return, the bank must pay interest on the loan and eventually pay the loan back. 3, the member bank then uses this new 100 million deposit to make loans to businesses or individuals, or to purchase securities such as government bonds. 4, the businesses or individuals who receive these loans can then use the money to make purchases, pay bills, or invest in other assets. This increases the overall supply of money in the economy. 5, as money is circulated and spent, it is eventually ends up in other banks, which can then use it to make their own loans and investments. This process continues until the 100 million has been fully injected into circulation. Overall, the Fed's ability to add new money into circulation through the banking system helps to stimulate economic growth and achieve its monetary policy goals.
So just a personal note here, a large part of the monetary growth that they're talking about here is rehypothecation of money that's put into the system. So they're allowing people to increase the monetary supply by rehypothecating money that's not there.
And there's a great example coming up.
All right, so let's go and take a look.
Right. So banks actually create new money every time they lend to customers or make investments. What? Yes, you read that right. When a bank makes a loan, it creates money by adding new funds to the borrower's account for the loan amount. The borrower can then use this money to make purchases or pay bills, effectively increasing the overall supply of money in the economy. We will see how next.
Okay.
Oh, it wasn't quite the last one. It's got
That's all right. Yeah.
Yep.
So we got this
Exercise.
class exercise, which we're going to do as best we can as a class here.
Yeah. And it does pretty much explain what we've just talked about.
Yeah. So we basically go through a practical example of seeing how the bank goes and rehypothecates funds to increase the monetary supply. So fractional reserve banking, or as I mentioned at the beginning, fictional reserve banking, but I quite like that. The process known as fractional reserve banking is where banks only hold a fraction of their deposits as reserves and lend out the rest. As long as they maintain a certain reserve ratio set by the central bank, banks can create more money than they have on hand. However, this ability to create new money can also carry the risk of excessive borrowing and financial instability if not managed carefully. The reserve ratio is a rule that tells banks how much money they have to keep in their safe and how much they can lend out. It is set by the central bank, which is a special group of people in charge of making sure the economy is healthy. I find that one rubs me. It's a special group of people which are in charge of making decisions. It is in this activity, we will explore the concept of fractional reserve banking and how it can lead to the debasement of a currency, inflation, and a decrease in purchasing power. Let's say the total amount of money in the economy is $1,000 and the reserve ratio is 50%. This means that for every 1,000 in the economy, 50% of it must be kept in reserve by the bank. If Enrique deposits $1,000 in the bank and later Kari comes to the bank for a loan, with the required ratio, the bank can keep half and lend half. So they would lend her $500 as a result. The total money supply would increase from $1,000 to $1,500.
So you can see in this, you've got the fractional reserve banking. So they're keeping half. So Enrique has got $1,000 he deposits into the bank. The fractional reserve banking, they will keep 50%, so they keep 500, but they can then lend the other 500 out. So they're going to lend it to Kari because she needs some money.
It's quite interesting that they say that she lends they lend $1,000. I'm not quite sure.
No, I think they've got
another mistake there.
Yeah, so they lend 500. So so the money supply grew from 1,000 to 1,500. So why that is because he deposited $1,000 in, and then they're able to actually use 50% of that and lend it out to somebody else.
So down the bottom here, we talk about the formula is money created equals the total amount of money in the economy divided by the reserve ratio. And we'll see that they've got an example here for what we've just talked about, which is the class exercise. Using the formula above, we can calculate the amount of money created as follows. So money created is $1,000 divided by 50% is $2,000. Please note that this is a little oversimplified. So I think what they're taking into consideration is that I think where the thing may have come up here is that they've got the $1,000 deposit and then they give Kari $500, but they've still got the $500, which is kind of in her name in a way because it's tied.
Well, it's in
it's in Enrique's. I think I know where they've doubled up the amount there. So I think this could be a bit clearer to make that a bit better. All right. We are going to model the creation of money in a small economy, which will consist of 6 participants. One will have the role of a bank. Woohoo! Just like Monopoly. The reserve ratio set by the central bank is calculated as proportion of customer deposits and determines how much commercial banks must set aside in storage rather than lend out. Let's assume, for the purpose of the simulation, that there is a mandate reserve ratio of 10%. For example, if a bank receives $100 and has a reserve requirement of 10%, it can lend out $90. If this loan is deposited in another bank, that bank can lend out $81, and so on. This creates a multiplier effect, increasing the overall money supply. This can stimulate the economy, but can also cause inflation if the money supply grows too quickly. So if we were in a class, we would grab some people and we would assign them these different roles in society, because we're going to do some banking.
Can do that after.
Yep. To find out how much money is created with a specific percentage ratio, you can use a formula. To use the formula, you first need to know the total amount of money in the economy. This is all the money that is being used to buy and sell goods and services. Then you need to know the reserve ratio, which is the percentage of money that a bank must keep on hand and not lend out. In summary, when a bank lends out money, it creates new money that didn't exist before, and this increases the total amount of money in the economy. Generally, countries with volatile economies or high levels of inflation have high reserve ratios to help mitigate risks and to stabilize the financial system. Sorry, I'm just going back a little bit. I'm just thinking about this here. I think what's happened is that's the total amount of money that can be created. So they increase the money supply to $1,500, but if Carrie went and deposited it, they could loan it out again.
Yeah.
And you could keep doing that until you got to smaller amounts and create the $2,000. So it does make sense. Sorry about the confusion there. Okay. So here's our task. So person A, Alice,
Yep.
just won $100,000 from the lottery and goes to a newly opened bank to deposit it. The bank, which is B, just B the bank, has a 10% ratio requirement. How much is B required to keep in its vault?
So if she's depositing 100,000, 10% of that would be 10,000. So they can keep. All they need to do is keep $10,000 in their vault.
The next morning, Charlie enters the bank and asks for a loan. How much can the bank lend out?
Well, of course, they have to, out of that 100,000, they have to keep 10,000. So then there's the 90,000 that they can then lend out.
C borrows the maximum amount because he wants to put down a payment on a house. So he's going to take the full 90.
Yeah.
Charlie then endorses the check and hands it over to Danny. So for the house. Danny then goes to the bank and deposits the check for his old house. How much did Danny deposit?
Well, he deposited the full amount, which was the $90,000.
What are the total deposits recorded in the bank at the moment?
So we had Alice put in $100,000. And then we've deposited, should I say, and then Danny has now deposited $90,000. So we've got $190,000 deposited in the bank.
Okay. Evan enters the bank and asks for a huge loan. The bank says that they can lend them at most $171,000.
Now that is because they've got $190,000 sitting in the bank. They have to keep 10% as their reserve amount, which would be $19,000. So that leaves them with $171,000 that they can lend out.
Evan walks out of the bank with the money and goes to buy a piece of art from Frankie. After a back and forth negotiation, the art piece is sold exactly for what Evan borrowed from the bank. Evan pays Frankie. Frankie deposits the money in the bank. What are the total deposits recorded at the moment?
So we've got Alice who deposited the initial $100,000. We've got Danny who then deposited the $90,000. And then we've got Frankie who's now deposited the $171,000. So we've got a total of $361,000 sitting in the bank at the moment.
Now, honestly, I actually hope we've done that right, because in the example above, it's meant to start decreasing. But because I guess these guys have kept these totals in the bank, in theory, you could do that. As we mentioned, I'm not sure if that's the way that they expected that to play out.
Remember, they're doing 50% they had to keep in the bank?
No, but but in the example above, in theory, it would get less every time. And this one, because of the way they've asked the question, we've ended up with 171. And
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, we'll keep going because this is what we've done. And
this is what we've done. But I can see how banks could easily do that and get away with that.
Yeah.
All right. So how much money is actually created with those 100,000 US dollars if the money continues to circulate throughout the economy? If we use the formula above, the $100,000 will end up being a total of $1 million by the time we've gone through the process.
Yeah, so you got your $100,000 divided by the reserve amount that they've got to keep, which is 10%, which is 0.1. That equals $1 million.
Yep. The reserve ratio is high. Banks have to keep more money in their safe and can lend out less. This can make it harder for people and businesses to borrow money and can slow down the economy. When the reserve ratio is low, banks have to keep less money in their safes and can lend out more. This can make it easier for people and businesses to borrow money and can make the economy grow faster. Also because they can not just borrow more money, but they can borrow it at a cheaper price as well. So can we figure out the answer for our class exercise where the reserve is 10%? Remember to convert 10% to a decimal. So 100,000 divided by the 0.1 would give us $1 million. Just out of curiosity, how much money would be created in an economy if the reserve ratio was lowered to 1%? Make sure you divide $100,000 by 0.01. The answer is $10 million. As of 2020, the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of United States of America, a private bank, reduced reserve requirement ratios to 0% in order to stimulate the economy. So the question that we're sort of left with is what would happen if you went and divided $100,000 by 0%, which is effectively free money.
Yeah.
And I think the point of that question is that is how we've now ended up at the point where they're basically just bailing out. It's pretty ironic that it's sort of happening right now, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
They're busy backstopping all deposits in all banks, and they will cover any amount that's in there at the moment.
Mm. Wow. So that is chapter 3, week 3. Any questions, please bring them on.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Again, next week, we're going to do chapter 4. Remember, do please go to the website and put your name in the form, and you'll go in the draw to get a device. We will be able to ship international, so not just USA people. Which will be awesome. And thank you to our partners who have come along to support us in what we're doing here. We've got Seed Signer with a free open source hardware wallet, which is awesome. FOSS, which was free open source software, but it's also open source hardware, which is excellent. We have the crypto tag, which is great for backing up your seed phrases. And then we have Bitbox 2.0, which is a Bitcoin first
Shift Crypto
hardware wallet from Shift Crypto, which is awesome.
So that's really, really, really wrapped that we've got these partners and they're sending directly to the winners.
Yep, they will post out. Yeah. If you're interested in buying one again, their devices are on the website. I think Seed Signer they may ship internationally. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, which is awesome. Thank you. And I think that's largely it. So we're going to put those books that we recommended into the description after this. So they are recommended reads. They're really good for children. We really appreciate anyone who's got any other thoughts or ideas. I'm just going to switch the screen so we can go back to the chat for a moment. Oops, I don't want that one. So if anyone's got any questions, that one's frozen now.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Right.
Liam, thanks, guys. No problem.
Thanks, Liam.
Thank you. Thank you for turning up. We really appreciate it. We look forward to you guys each week.
Yeah.
And
we do.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah. And, this is open source stuff. My first Bitcoin. And that's the main thing. I mean, the logo's on it. So hopefully you guys are seeing that. But they are doing huge work for the Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin space. They've been down in Costa Rica at the moment for the NostaCon or whatever, Nosta Rica Con or something.
Yeah.
So they've been down there. They met with Jack Dorsey while they're down there. They presented him with his own copy of the Bitcoin Diploma. They're basically outsourcing what they're doing, and they're creating chapters all over the world now. So if you're in a country and you would like to be on the ground teaching this stuff to people, reach out to My First Bitcoin. They're talking to people all over the world already about setting up what their organization, like you set up a replica of them in your country, and you then put people on the ground who go around and teach the diploma to people. And this is all open source and free. Anybody can just pick it up and run with it.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
All right. Hey, thanks, guys. We're a bit over time, but I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to catching up with you next Wednesday. And I think we actually go past the money stuff. We might start talking about some Bitcoin.
Yeah. It'd be exciting.
All
awesome.
right.
All right. Thank you very much.
See ya. Bye.